Welcome, good afternoon. Welcome to our Horticulture Town Hall. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. My name is Donna Oftenberg, and I'm your host for today. I am located in the southeast portion of Missouri, down by Cape Girardeau. Other horticulture specialists joining us today include Jennifer Shooter, Debbie Kelly, Katie Kamler. I'm trying to get my computer to work. Kathy Meacham, Kelly McGowan, Tamara Rial, and from MU campus, we have Jared Fogue, Dr. Pongtian, Dr. Pat Guinan, and Dr. Michelle Warman. Once again, thank you for joining us. If you have questions during our town hall, Pong has changed his name to Ask Your Questions Here. So if any time you have a question, just go to ask your questions here and make sure to include your name and your email address so that if we run out of time that you will be able to get your questions answered. So someone will be in touch with you. So as we get started, we're going to go ahead and have a weather report from Pat Guinan.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon, everyone. It's been about almost a month since we last visited at the end of September, and things really haven't changed in regard to the temperature category. We had a very mild September. It ranked in the top 20 for the state. You know, we have weather records that go back well over 100 years, and boy, October has been a very mild one as well. On the left, you can see the temperature departure from normals for generally about the first 3 weeks of October. Look at these colors. I mean, when you start running double digits or near double digits above normal for a 3-week period, you're talking about probably a top 10 warmest period on record. And so unusually mild conditions across much of the north central US, the upper Midwest, especially where they have those double digit departures above normal. But on the right, you can see looking at Missouri, again, very warm conditions for the first 3 weeks of October, generally running anywhere from about 5 to as much as 8 degrees above average in the northeast corner of the state. And so to provide a little bit of perspective on this warmth that we've seen during the first 20 days of October, you have to go back 14 years. So you have to go back to October 1st and through 20th of 2007 to find a warmer period. So that really provides some perspective on this unusual October warmth we're experiencing this year. Where are the freezing temperatures? We really haven't seen any here, with a few exceptions here in Missouri. But on the left, this is a map showing since July 1st up through yesterday, locations that have experienced freezing temperatures. And that's pretty much delegated to the west across the Rockies and the northern plains. There are some locations still in Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota, even the Dakotas, where they haven't witnessed a 32-degree temperature or colder. So indeed, it really just shows this unusual warmth that has really lasted through much of the month of October. The lower left shows I've only found 3 locations here in Missouri where we saw 32-degree temperatures, and it's where you would expect. Parts of the eastern Ozarks in Shannon County, a couple locations. These are low-lying areas. They generally do experience early first freezing temperatures during the fall, and they're all relegated to that location in Shannon and Crawford counties, where the temperatures did dip just a few days ago to around 31, 32 degrees. There were some reports of some scattered frost across the state, but most locations we have been frost-free for the month of October. And just to provide perspective, on the right, this is climatology showing a map of when we would anticipate our average date of the first fall freeze of 32 degrees or less. And you can see it should have already happened across much of northern Missouri. Here we are into October 20th, and generally you would anticipate that across around the first or second week of October across much of northern Missouri. The Ozark Plateau, again, low-lying areas, we would anticipate a first fall freeze by now, but we're just not seeing that. But if you want to look at more information on temperature thresholds, looking at this IPM frost freeze guide, I put the website here on the bottom where you can get an idea of the climatologies for not only 32 degrees, but other temperature thresholds as well. Precipitation for the month. I think the thing that has changed since we last visited is the precipitation patterns. It's been a much wetter one in October versus what we saw in September. September was a dry, warm month. October, it's turning out to be a wet, warm month. On the left, these are the accumulated precipitation estimates across the state, generally running anywhere from 2 to over 5 inches of rain, especially here across southern Missouri. These blue areas indicate more than 5 inches for the first 20 days of the month. And on the right gives you an idea of the departure from normal for that time frame. Much of the state seeing above normal precipitation so far for October. The exception to that are a little dry pockets in northeast Missouri, the far northwest corner, maybe here a pocket here in Phelps County, Denton County, and around Crawford County. But overall, it's been a much wetter one. I will say that's welcome precipitation because the grasses were turning brown or going dormant. But with these warm and wetter conditions, we have seen some renewed grass growth across much of the state. So that was welcome here in Missouri. Currently, our current conditions are indicating a still above normal temperatures as of about 10 minutes ago. You can see across the state using Missouri Mesonet real-time temperatures. They're generally running in the upper 60s and lower 70s. The only exception, we do have a cold front moving through the state currently across northwest Missouri. It looks like it's passed through the St. Joe area where we see cooler temperatures only in the upper 50s. That front will move through the course of the day, and you'll notice that with windier conditions out of the west, as well as falling temperatures as that cold front moves through the state through much of the day. Dew points on the right, very pleasant conditions, above normal temperatures currently, running 10 or so degrees above normal with very mild moisture, not low moisture conditions in regard to dew point. In the lower left, this will be our last warm day for the next few days. Again, highs will top out before the front moves through, perhaps in the middle, upper 70s across eastern portions of the state. You'll notice those lower temperatures tonight as the front moves throughout the entire state of Missouri. Much cooler conditions on Thursday, highs only struggling in the lower to perhaps upper 60s across southern parts of the state. Lows tomorrow morning, generally in the lower to middle, maybe perhaps upper 40s across southern Missouri. A little bit of a rebound on Friday with highs generally again in the lower 60s, perhaps 70 across southern parts of the state. Cool Saturday morning with lows in the upper 30s to middle 40s. But again, no freezing temperatures are anticipated over the next several days. On the lower right shows another active system impacting our state on Saturday and on to Saturday night and Sunday. More clouds, but warmer conditions as a warm front moves through the state with highs generally on Saturday in the lower 60s across northern parts of the state to lower 70s across southern Missouri. Again, mild conditions above normal temperatures despite the clouds and the rain that is anticipated for Sunday, generally highs in the mid 60s to middle 70s. I will note that average high temperatures this time of year generally run in the low to mid 60s. This is the forecast of precipitation over the next 7 days. I think the big thing we see happening is a much more active weather pattern. There could be a few light showers triggered by that cold front moving through today. Nothing really significant, no heavy precipitation anticipated. It's the system this weekend and then another system forecast by midweek that could bring some significant rainfall across all of Missouri. Again, you can see here, look at some of these totals over the next 7 days, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of precipitation across all of Missouri, especially it looks like north, central, northeast, parts of central Missouri. Much of that area could see 1.5 to 2 inches of precipitation over the next 7 days. And look at this forecast for temperatures. Again, we've had a very warm October. This is a forecast for next week. It's a 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. So that'll take us throughout much of the last week of October. There is a high likelihood, according to the forecasters from the Climate Prediction Center, for these above normal temperatures to impact or to continue across much of the central US. You can see that darker shade of red, that gives high confidence for above normal temperatures. Again, that would put high temperatures throughout much of next week, well into the 60s, perhaps even the 70s. So some very nice weather over as we end up the last week of October. It does look a little bit unsettled, though, with more precipitation chances I mentioned over the weekend, but it does look like perhaps another system moving in from the Gulf of Mexico by midweek bringing us another shot at some above normal precipitation as we go into the middle and latter part of next week. Donna, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Pat. It's just been such beautiful weather and the temperatures have been nice, but I am ready for a cool down. So anyhow, everybody's got a different life when it comes to weather. At this point, I will turn it over to Jennifer as your moderator.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start our topics off with Katie Kamler, and she is going to talk about pumpkins, the edible versus the non-edible ones.
All right, are we at the right screen?
I do not see your presentation.
All right, I think maybe it was going.
Okay, now I do.
All right. So it's October, it's fall decoration time, and now you can find lots of different pumpkin squash and gourds out there. And I get asked a lot of times, what's edible, what's not? Well, the reality, this picture and these pictures, a lot of these are edible and a lot are not so edible. And then all I consider them decorative or ornamental, regardless. The gourds in these pictures, most of the time these are considered ornamental because you just really wouldn't want to eat them, not to say that you couldn't. It's just that the flavor and all of that and time invested into processing it wouldn't be worthwhile. Of course, in the cucurbita species are summer squash, very edible. So scallop, crookneck, zucchini. The reality is that kind of the differentiation between summer squash and winter squash is we pick a summer squash when they're immature. So we pick them when they're small, the skin is not tough, and the seeds aren't big because that's how we eat that. And then another part is edible is the squash blossoms. Sometimes I just think it's an excuse to dip something in batter and fry it, but squash blossoms are edible. And if you look at the stems here, you can actually see that these are all male blossoms because cucurbits have male and female blossoms. So once pollination is done, it's easy to pick the male blossoms and still have squash. For eating purposes, and if you buy a can of pie pumpkin, it is actually going to come from these tan colored pumpkins. So here's a good example of just cutting a pumpkin in half, removing the stem, removing the seeds and some of that stringy pulp, and then baking them and scooping out that bright orange flesh to make pumpkin yourself. So great edibility. And I've got a picture here of commercial pumpkin harvest. This is pictures that my aunt took. She lives in central Illinois. Illinois is actually the #1 producer of pumpkins in the United States. And the biggest reason for that is they process 90 to 95% of all the canned pie pumpkin or canned pumpkin in the US. And the reason for that is they have the processing facilities. Libby Pie Processing Facility is in Morton, Illinois. And my aunt, on these pictures, you can see they actually use a lot of equipment. The vines are all gone. They're windrowing them and have equipment that picks them up into carry wagons, and then they get dumped into semis to be hauled to the processing plant. And I got a kick out of my aunt. She did not realize either that tan pumpkins are what goes into your pie pumpkins. These are cucurbita machata type So your butternut squash are in this family, and anything that's that tan colored or cucurbita machata, and most desirable for eating. So here's just an example, the tan cucurbita machata, a pumpkin pie recipe. Everybody has their favorites, and anymore you can find recipes for lots and lots of different pumpkin things. One of my favorite is actually called a pumpkin torte, which it's a layered dessert with a cheesecake, a graham cracker crust, a cheesecake layer, and then a pumpkin layer, and then whipped cream on top. I have the jack-o'-lantern pumpkin here crossed out. Honestly, jack-o'-lantern pumpkins are bred for being jack-o'-lanterns, being decorative, being ornamental. So they're bred for color, they're bred for stems. In some cases, they're bred for carving, they're bred for disease resistance. So it's not one that you really want to spend your time on as far as using it to eat. Many edible varieties. So just a picture of some of them. This is a peanut pumpkin, very edible. Jardale is in the center, the green one there, and it's used, very desirable by chefs to use for pumpkin soups and such like that. This is a banana squash. Also, they can get up to 40 pounds. Delicatata is a small squash, but considered a winter squash and used a lot like you would summer squash. This one in the very center is Long Island cheese, and that's a cucurbita machata again, and it'll have that bright orange flesh on the inside. This one's called Australian butter, and this one and all of these on the top row are all cucurbita maxima types. This one is actually this one and this one, the delicatata, and this one at the bottom right corner is called winter luxury. And those are cucurbita pepo. And so this one was actually bred for pie. This is my favorite, the green and white striped cushaw, although they do come in yellow stripes and tricolor. And this is what I grew up as with for pie. And that's still what I make pie out of to this day is cushaw squash. And the last one, this is another cucurbita machata. So eventually it will turn tan, but at this stage it is called a frog pumpkin. Because it looks like the flesh of a frog. So cut into that one just like the Long Island cheese and be bright orange in the center. And then we also have varieties for edible seed. So this one's called Silver Edge. It is that because of the green and white stripes, it is in that cushaw family, the cucurbita mixta group, considered an heirloom. Very decorative also, and has those edible seeds. You can see those large seeds with silver edge. And then this one is Debbie's favorite. This one's Lady Godiva. And Lady Godiva was known for riding naked through the streets. So they've named it that because the seed is naked. So it's a holeless seed. And another heirloom, and also I consider that very decorative. So there are lots and lots more out there that are edible. These are just a few. So if you're curious about what you've picked up or grown is edible, there's lots of good information out there, or feel free to ask.
All right, thank you, Katie. It is now time to do our friend or foe. And Katie is also going to do that one.
All right, let me get my screen shared. All right, are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, so is this a friend or foe? And I'll launch the poll. and give it just a few seconds here, more seconds to see. All right. It's fun to see your answers. I'll share the results here. So the majority of you said friend, and I'm going to stop that and show you that that is actually the egg case of praying mantis. So we do consider praying mantis a friend. They are foes to other insects. They're non-discriminatory. They will eat whatever they can catch. We have Chinese mantis, and that's kind of an invasive species, I guess you would say, because it's not native here, but we also have native Carolina mantis also. So both of these are known here, and those are the egg cases for those. So if you see those in your landscape, you want to leave them, and we'll have a new crop of praying mantis in the springtime.
All right, thank you, Katie. Next, we're going to move on to overwintering plants, and Kelly is going to talk about hardy versus non-hardy plants to overwinter.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Let me pull this up. Okay, how's that? Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we're going to talk about hardy versus non-hardy plants. And I just wanted to remind everyone about the growing zone that you might be in. And this is important to know when you are purchasing plants and you're not really sure if they are going to overwinter here in Missouri. You can refer to this map, see what your growing zone is, and sometimes that can be helpful. So first, let's talk about how plants survive winter. They have developed several different strategies over the years to help them survive winter. Deciduous plants, which is basically trees mainly, they will drop their leaves and go dormant in the winter. And as the days start to shorten and the temperature starts to cool, many plants are going to start kind of the hardening off process. And you may have heard of that term when it comes to seedlings and new plants in the spring. But some of our established plants will go through this process about this time of the year as well. And during this time, they're pumping water out of the cells of the plants back down into the roots. And if there's any sap remaining, that kind of acts as an antifreeze for the plants. So there's a lot of internal things going on with plants right now to help them survive winter. Now, as far as evergreens go, they of course do keep their foliage, but their leaves and needles have this thick, waxy coating on them to help with water loss. And other plants also have thick, waxy coatings on their leaves as well, and that's also to help prevent water loss. Herbaceous plants are not woody like trees and shrubs. They actually will die back to the ground every year. Now, the above ground part of the plant may be dead, but the root system is still very much alive and it's protected underground. Now, as far as herbaceous plants, probably two of the most common that we see with homeowners is daylilies and peonies. Now, of course, there's many, many other types as well. These are just a couple of examples. Native plants, I will say that, you know, the popularity of native plants has just really exploded over the last few years for a number of different reasons, and winter protection is certainly one of those reasons. Native plants have evolved to survive our winters, to survive temperature fluctuations, that sort of thing. So it's always kind of a sure bet that if you buy a native plant, that if it's established before we go into winter, that it's likely to survive. Now, non-native trees. Now I'm showing some very popular ones here. I've got an ornamental cherry, an early blooming magnolia, and of course, peach trees. These are not native to Missouri, to our area, but they are very popular in the home landscape. And while they can certainly survive our winters, they often get bit by an early season frost. They will bloom well before our average late spring frost. So these things are always a gamble. And again, they will likely to survive the winter. They just might not bloom as expected. So some of the most common non-hardy plants that are going to need to spend the winter indoors is houseplants. And I know over the past weekend, I brought in all of my houseplants and it was a major chore, but they're very happy spending the summers outside and they need to come in the winter. Elephant ears are also a very common plant that needs to be dug up and brought in. And you also need to ask yourself, do you want to mess with overwintering it or not? So Boston ferns is kind of that classic example. Many people buy those to decorate their porch in the summertime. And then as we get into this time of the year, they wonder what they should do with it. Should I try to bring it in and overwinter it? And speaking from experience, Boston ferns can be overwintered indoors, but they do drop a lot of leaf debris. So you're constantly cleaning up. Ficus can also do the same thing, as you can see here in this picture. Ficus are very sensitive to being moved around. So if they go from being outdoors to brought inside, they can drop leaves as kind of a stress response until they get acclimated to their new home. So just be aware of these things and use your own judgment whether or not you want to mess with it. Now, I did mention elephant ears, and typically they are dug and brought in for the winter. The same thing with cannas. They are typically dug up and brought in for the winter. However, cannas and elephant ears can sometimes survive outside. Now, here in the pictures that I'm showing, we have cannas up next to a house. Now, they would be much more protected here from winter winds than, say, this other picture where they're out in an open area. So cannas and even elephant ears are sometimes hit and miss. Sometimes they will survive just fine. Sometimes they will die back. I've had cannas up next to my house for several years. They've always survived and came back very well. So sometimes it just depends on the location. Succulents. So here at the Springfield Botanical Gardens, we have a very extensive succulent garden. And for the most part, the succulents in our succulent garden are winter hardy. Now, these plants are on the south side up next to a building, so they do get some protection from winter winds, and they also get optimal sunlight during the winter. So for the most part, they do survive our winters, but we do have a lot of potted succulents as well, such as the one in this photo that we do overwinter indoors. So this is also one of the things that's kind of hit and miss. It depends on where it's located, what kind of protection it gets. But for the most part, most of our succulents will be okay outdoors. So what about container plants? What about hardy plants that are in containers? Well, the first picture here is some containers up on an elevated surface in the snow. Now, plants in containers can often survive the winter just fine, but they do need protection from winter winds. And the ones up on this elevated surface probably are not going to have adequate protection and will likely not survive. Now, the other picture here is a picture of some containers that have been healed in. This is something that our master gardeners do a lot with plants that they're planning on selling the following year in a plant sale. They will either heal those in or group all of the pots together in a protected area again, to protect from those winter winds. So it just depends on the situation, but try to give them as much protection as you can. And you can also mulch with straw if you're concerned about cold temperatures as well. And be sure to reach out to any of us that are on today's town hall about questions about hardiness or overwintering specific plants, and we can certainly help out with that. All right, that's all I have, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. We are now going to answer a question that one of our listeners asked ahead of time. And the question is, I just bought some land and want to put in a home garden. There are no signs of a garden on the land. What do I need to do now to start my gardening adventure? And Donna is going to answer that for us.
Okay, so excellent question, because I'm sure there's several in the crowd that probably have similar wants for information. So the first thing that we recommend is taking a look at the sites around the property, and you want to select a site that is fairly level. It can have a little bit of incline to it for drainage, but fairly level. You want it close to water, and that way it's easier to water it during the season. And you want also an area that doesn't have any mature trees or any obstacles or anything that might shade the area. I know a lot of people they think that putting them close to the house or a shop or a garage would be good. Well, in some cases it is, but if shading will be a problem, then definitely you need to seek out a different site. So definitely site selection is important. And you want to take also a look at the soil. You want a well-drained soil. You don't want a low spot where water collects, because a lot of our vegetable plants do not want wet feet, and even annuals and perennials do not want wet feet. So take a look at that. You might dig a hole that is about 6 to 10 inches deep and fill it full of water. And if that water goes down very quickly, then you have a well-drained soil. If it goes down maybe halfway and stops, or it's very slow draining, that means that the soil drainage is not very well. And so you need to probably seek out a different spot. The other thing that you might do is you might pick out 3 or 4 different spots and get a soil test done on them. And that would allow you to see what the fertility levels are and what the pH is. And that way you would know what you would have to do to correct that soil to be able to grow plants in the soil. Once you have that soil test done, then you can take it and use it to amend the soil prior to planting. And so that when I say amend, that means you're adding things to that soil. So you're adding compost, or you're adding gypsum for calcium, or you're adding just a number of different things. So it allows you to know what to apply to your soil and put into it. Now, to get the soil test done, locate your local extension office and find out if they have a soil probe. You can also do it with a shovel. But what your goal is to get 6 to 8 inches of soil depth. And then that way it collects the root zone where the roots will be growing. And so you can take a pint's worth of soil into the extension office, make sure to get 6 or 8 random spots, 6 to 8 inches deep, and you put them in a clean bucket, mix them up, and pull 1 representative sample. So once again, you're going to be taking about a pint's worth of soil to your local extension office. And once that soil test comes back, definitely amend your soils based on it. If you have questions, you can contact your local extension horticulturist, and they can help you decipher what those results mean, and maybe give some tips on and some improvements that can happen in your soil. Once you get all that done, you can work that soil. A lot of people choose to work a soil in December to turn up any insect eggs or anything that could benefit from freezing. Then they come back and they work it again in the spring, a couple of weeks prior to gardening. So I'm one of these that I don't tend to till as much. I think it destroys the soil too much. So just be cautious how much you do work the soil. Once you get that soil worked, we have a wonderful vegetable planting calendar. This is something that you could download this winter and start, taking a look at your garden, taking a look at the things that you want to plant and draw out that, maybe the garden to scale and start jotting down where you would put things and think about your spacing and how much room you would really need. So Guide 6201 Vegetable Planting Calendar is awesome because it tells you how many feet you would need per person of certain vegetables. It also gives you spacing. It gives you how many days till germination and harvest. And it also gives you planting dates based on where you are in Missouri. So you can't go wrong in downloading that calendar and using it as a resource. The other thing that you might do is get a hold of your local extension horticulturist and just talk about some of these things. What is the thing, what is the most important things that you need to be doing? The other thing is that definitely is continue your education in gardening. We have lots of opportunities coming up in the next 6 months for continuing that education with some of our online education and webinars. And I do know there's a group of us that are planning a virtual garden series for beginner gardeners, and you would definitely find that useful. If you're interested in those webinars, please reach out to one of your local horticulturists, and we'll share that map later in the webinar. And that way you can see who's your local person, reach out to them and say, hey, let me know when those come around because I do want to take them. And then once again, when spring comes around, you'll be ready if you do all this. And definitely reach out to one of us and we can help you along the way.
Thank you, Donna. Dr. Lee Miller, our state turfgrass specialist, is unable to be with us today, and he asked Debbie Kelly to say a few words about lawns in his place.
Actually, Jennifer, I am here. I just got back. So Debbie, I guess I'll just go ahead and take it. I just wanted to say that this is a very odd year. We've had a couple warm falls, particularly with what Dr. Guinan just reported to us. We actually are still kind of in seeding range with all the rain that's going to come. If you miss that seeding window for your lawn, and particularly that second application of fertilizer, we're still in that range where we can get that done. So don't hold back on that aspect. As with everything else, your lawn should be growing pretty well now, particularly because most of our lawns are cool season grasses. So just make sure that you're maintaining the mowing frequency. And you also don't fret if you have some leaves on top of the lawn. You can go ahead and mow those in. Just use the mulch aspect of the deck, and you can mow those in. They do not contribute to thatch or anything bad. You actually can go on and just hopefully get some of those leaves out of the way. Now, I actually just saw an article which I kind of disagreed with about leaving the leaves on the lawn. That is not a great idea. It will actually smother the lawn. I've seen many lawns fail because of that, particularly in densely wooded or densely treed backyards. So you will have to get it off the lawn so that you can get light. If you think about it, if you cover anything with shade, particularly wet leaves, then you're going to have fungus and disease. But you're also just going to limit that lawn's health and any plant's health for that matter. So you can mow the leaves in. If they get too much, you might have to remove them and put them into a compost pile. But for the most part, don't worry too much if you just have a few leaves and you can get them in. And even if you're going to see them, it's not going to be as bad as leaving the full leaf on top. So that's all I have, Jennifer. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lee. I'm glad you were able to join us. Okay, moving on. Now's the time to divide perennials, and Dr. Tamara Real is going to tell us how to do that.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're actually going to be watching a video that my Extension Master Gardeners put together, and Jared is going to go ahead and start that.
Do you have perennial plants that scream, "I'm crowded, help me"? This week's Tuesday tip is how to dig and divide plants. What makes a perennial beg to be divided? A plant that's too large for the spot or crowding out other plants. You might see them thinning or bald at the center. If neighboring plants are being crowded out, or what should look like a clump looks more like a ring, then it's time to dig and divide.
Perennials grow back each year from roots that go dormant in winter, and they are sometimes referred to as comeback beauties or forever plants. Because of this, they occasionally benefit from digging and dividing. The best time of year to divide a perennial is during the fall when the temperature is cool and plants require less water. Begin 6 to 8 weeks before cold weather hits so the perennial can have new roots established before cold weather sets in. To get started, soak the ground 2 to 3 days prior to surgery. You will need a sharp, clean spade to dig, a sharp knife or cutting tool, your water supply. You may also want pots and soil for your divided plants. Using a sharp, clean spade, dig a semicircular path around the perimeter of the plant. Dig straight down and locate the root ball, and lift the plant clump, digging around the plant, trying not to damage the rhizomes or tubers.
Gently shake off the soil and wash the soil off so that you can see the roots. Inspect the roots for any damage and remove any dead or rotting part of the plant. Separate the plant into vigorous shoots with a good supply of roots. Keep the shoots and roots moist until you replant them. Select the best location with appropriate sunlight and well-drained soil. Prepare the soil by removing any weeds and dig a hole of the same depth as the mother plant. Open up the roots of the division. Fill your new hole or pot with original soil and compost. Pat down and water. Do not fertilize in the fall, but in the spring, apply an all-purpose 5-10-5 fertilizer to encourage new root growth. Some perennials like to be divided and some don't. Refer to the MU guide sheets linked below. Dividing your perennials is one way to keep your garden looking its best, and a great way to share plants with friends and neighbors. Thank you for joining us. With a little digging and dividing, your overcrowded plants will be happy with room to grow. Good luck digging and dividing.
I added the link to that video if you want to go back to it. And I also added a guide sheet that you can get more information from. So I hope that you have fun. It's a great way to be able to increase the plants that you have in your yard. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Tamara and Jared. Moving on, our next topic is lighting options for plants in the winter, and Donna is going to talk about that.
Okay, give me a second, pull up my screen. Okay. So since everybody is thinking about bringing plants in, we decided to talk about lighting options. I know that when we have our plants outdoors, they usually get a lot more light than what they will indoors once winter starts to arrive. And so we have to start thinking about where we're going to put all those plants and what's the best way to keep them looking good. And the best way to keep them looking good, of course, is the water, the fertilizing, and the lighting and warmth. And so lighting is very important. So we're going to talk about a few options here. Get my computer to work. All right, there we go. So the first one I want to talk about is natural light. In all of lighting, we have quantity versus quality. And so with houseplants and in tropicals, we find we have low light plants, we have medium light plants, and we have high light plants. So it's important for you to do a little bit of research and find out, okay, which category does it fall into, because that will dictate what kind of light you need to be looking for. For example, high light plants, definitely if you're looking at the natural light option, you need to look at the west and south windows, because in the winter, fall and winter, our sun sits lower and it sits towards the west and the south. So those are the best windows you can get for sun exposure. If you have medium light plants, you can use west or south windows or east windows. Just be aware that west and south windows can get a little hot. And so you may have to monitor that situation. Now on low light plants, definitely you're going to have to stick with the east and north windows. But I love trying to use natural light. In my home, I have great big windows. And so for me, natural light works the best. Now, if you're in a home where your windows just aren't that big, or you have overhangs over your windows, that decreases a lot of the light that's coming in. So you may have to look at other options. Another would be fluorescent light fixtures. Now, I'm grouping grow lights in with fluorescents, and only because they're a tubular type light that you can use in a light fixture. The big thing you want to avoid here is don't get daylight bulbs. You just want to make sure that you can use warm bulbs, cool bulbs, or you can use grow lights. I really like the idea of using fluorescent lights because they are, the light fixtures are very economical, low price, and the bulbs are not bad either. They're reasonably priced. I know that the grow bulbs are more expensive. They run about $15 to $17 a bulb, depending on where you get them from. And so a lot of the publications are now saying a good combination to keep energy use and dollar savings to a minimum. Try to pair one grow bulb to 2 fluorescent bulbs. And that way you get the light spectrum you need, but it's not costing you a lot of money. The one thing that a lot of people make the mistake on when they're putting plants under fluorescents is their fluorescent bulbs will be 6 feet away. Well, in order for the plants to utilize those light waves, you really need to have them no more than 12 inches away. So wherever you put your plants, and if you're going to use fluorescents, be prepared to drop that light to that plant height. And so just keep that in mind. The other thing that a lot of publications will tell you is plants will benefit from side light as well as top light. And so there are plans out there to put a fluorescent light fixture on its side and to shine up into the canopy of the plants. Now, I've always just have done the top lighting, and that has been suitable. Now, you don't want to light plants with aged bulbs. You want to make sure that they're newer bulbs. And so as a fluorescent ages, it loses that light spectrum. And so then it becomes not effective for the plants. So definitely start out with new bulbs or newer bulbs. The other option is LED lights. Now, this is a lot more expensive option. It's our newest technology, but you can really put some dollars into LEDs. Now, not all LEDs are created equal. There are regular LEDs, and then there are plant LEDs. So if you try to go after LED lights, make sure it is labeled for plants. And that way you know that they're getting the blue and red spectrum that they need. These are the most energy efficient. The price that, even though you're saving money on the energy, you're going to be paying upfront for the technology. And so just keep that in mind, shop around, and just basically read the ads through before you do any ordering. Getting the most out of the lighting, whether you use fluorescents or LEDs, these are, or even natural light. These are some of the tips. Replace the old bulbs when needed. Utilize white surfaces or use painted surfaces or reflective materials. And that way the light is bounced back into the plant from those surfaces. Definitely 6 to 12 inches away from the plant, no further than that, because then you lose all benefit of the light. And make sure to space the plants apart. I know we tend to cram them all into one little space, but space them a little bit. That way that light shines down in between those plants. And so we have a great guide. It's lighting indoor houseplants, and you can find that on our MU Extension website. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of the Extension horticulturists, and we are more than happy to help you.
All right, thank you, Donna. We've had 2 questions that have come in. One is, can you hill and figs in Missouri? And if you leave your cannas outdoors, when should you cut down the tall canes? And Pong is going to answer those for us. Pong, are you answering those? You are muted.
Oh, I'm not answering the question. I just saw this question that just posted. Are you asking me? I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm confused. I thought you were answering them. Okay, can you hill and figs in Missouri? Well, I grow figs here in Northeast Missouri, and I have to grow them in containers because they will probably die here in the northern part of the state. So I pull them in to my unheated garage in the winter. I do know that James Quinn, our retired horticulture specialist, grows fig trees in Columbia in his yard, and they do die back all the way to the ground. And then he has covered them with mulch to protect them. And then I believe he cuts them back in the springtime. And if any of the rest of you want to chime in here, go right ahead. Anyone?
I have a fig tree as well, and I have it actually kind of closer to my house, so there's a microclimate. I've heard that people who are north of I-70 may need to have it so that it can go in the house, but if you're south of I-70, you might be able to get away with it. I'm slightly south of I-70, and my fig tree was able to come back this year. It's my 2nd year, and I had figs. I'm very excited about it, but I did have to protect it over the winter, like you were saying. So I did put mulch over it, and as we would have those frosts, and it was starting to have that fresh growth this last spring, I did cover it. But it did come back, and it was beautiful and amazingly delicious. I do recommend people try to grow figs.
Good. Okay. Thank you. And then the next question is, if you leave your cannas outdoors, when should you cut down the tall canes? Well, cannas are, they don't like, cold temperatures or frozen soil. So you have to dig those up and bring them in if you want to save them. So I grow cannas, and I do wait until they are turning yellow or they've died back from a frost or freeze, and then I dig them. So to answer that, cut them back, when they're starting to turn yellow or brown, or they die back from the first hard freeze or frost. But then be sure you get those the bulbs out of the ground, because they will freeze, especially here in northern Missouri. I have had them turn to mush when I have left them in the ground some years, so they will not recover. So yeah, bring those in, and then you can plant them the next spring. And anyone else want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, Jennifer. In southern Missouri, probably Cape Girardeau area, we leave them in the ground. We just mulch them with about 6 inches of mulch, and they come back faithfully.
Okay, yeah, differences in southern Missouri and northern Missouri. Thanks, Donna. Okay, and we are going to start wrapping this up now. And the last thing we want to talk about is renaming the town hall. And Donna, I understand you're going to talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. For the purpose of making the Horticulture Town Hall sound more inviting for gardeners and homeowners, we have decided to change our town hall name. We would like your ideas on what to rename it. So get inspired, be imaginative, be creative. We would like your ideas. Drop your naming ideas in the chat box, or you can email any of us that are listed up on the screen. And we will gather those names here shortly, and then we'll send you out an email and have you help us pick out the name. Sounds like fun, right? I can't wait to get started. So we're looking forward to this adventure. So as we close out, I put up the screen again that has all the horticulturists listed. Definitely take a look at the map. I'll put it back up here in a second. But just remember that everything we're doing is now on live stream on YouTube. So if you want to go back and review previous town halls, or you want to look again at this town hall, or you want to even take a look at some of the snippets that we've recorded, head on over to YouTube and type in MUIPM, and that will pop up that website, and you can just browse around there. There's lots of good information there. So just as a reminder, we went back to monthly. So our next one will be November 17th at noon, of course. And once again, if you have questions that come up, you'll have to go back to the website and re-register with that question. But, it's a great time to start thinking about next year and thinking about, different plans and things that you can be doing. So shoot us those questions. We're here to talk about gardening and talk about the right way of doing things, and to also learn ourselves. And so here's the map again. So definitely take a look and see who your local person is. We do have some gaps around the state. So if you are in an area where there's a gap, just go to the next person closest to you. So thank you for joining us. Join us for next month, and we'll have more to share with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.